What's going on, guys? And it's time to start another work in progress, because why not? You could always use more works in progress, and this is something that I promised my buddy there, Strider Prime, that I would do a build off with him, because when I built this kit up, just for the review and everything, I had the idea to paint it straight away. It's just that it doesn't necessarily put a specific timeline on it for me, but he got in touch with me and asked me if I wanted to do a build off with him, because he was getting the kit and painting it up as well. So I said, alright, good, sure, that'll be good motivation to keep me working on this and not to postpone it. But so he's already started working on his, and he said he's going to be working on his throughout the month of April, so I guess I better work on mine in April as well. So obviously I've already got the kit all built up. It's now a process of breaking it down and getting it all sanded and prepped for painting. I'm not going to do any modifications to it other than a little bit of seam line removal and a couple of seams on it. So we'll go over that in this video first, and then we'll just get into the painting. And the other thing, the reason why I didn't get started on this sooner actually is because I still hadn't really decided on what paint scheme I wanted to go for this. I couldn't really nail it down as to what colors I wanted to use. This is just a very unique model, obviously, so I wanted to use something that I thought was going to look cool. And I think what I've decided to go for is a test type color scheme. So the black part's basically going to stay mostly black, and the silver parts I think are going to go to a kind of whitish color. The wings I think are going to be in a kind of grayish color, and then the parts that are in that like purplish color are going to be changed to bright orange. So it's going to have a sort of test type colors. And another kind of help in motivating that was also recently got these decals here, which are very cool, from HIQ Parts in orange, gray, and dark gray, because I just always like to have more decals than I'll ever need. And I wanted to have some different color options. I didn't buy these in order to use on this kit, just happened to buy them around the same time, ordered these, and I think these will actually work really well on this. So I'm not sure exactly which color I'll end up using for the kit, but just each set comes with them in white and in whatever other color. So there's some really cool decals here. For example, there's a modified, test type, and special, so I'll be using some like the test type decals there. And so some really nice decals that I think will work really perfectly for this model, I think. So I think that'll work out really well. Anyway, so yeah, let's just get down to breaking the kit down and sorting out the seam lines we need to work on and all that. Starting off here with the head, there's no seam lines on this, luckily, so I'll have to just break this down into the parts, and what I'll have to do is just keep the clear parts here and the clear parts in here, and for the eyes, I'll just have to keep those all separately until like the very end of the process. Then I'll have to put them back into the head, because I'm not going to try to like go through the whole process with just like masking those clear parts. I'll just keep them out separate throughout the whole process, so we'll have to just sand those parts, but no seam lines to remove. That's good. The waist section as well, as you might imagine, no seam lines here either, unless you want to count this one underneath the kind of center of the hips, but I'm not really going to be worried too much about that, so that's also fine. Also, the torso as well, these clear parts, I'll have to keep those nice and protected. They're already kind of dusty, but that's okay. But yeah, the seam lines on this one also are covered up here, and then hidden here by just details, so no seam lines on the torso as well. That's easy enough. On the arms though, here's where we are going to run into some seams here on the upper arm. I'll just glue those. Now the problem with that is that once these are separated, you can see it's holding this elbow joint in between these parts. So what I'm going to do is just remove the parts on that, and then later we'll have to glue this back in place. So on this side we got these two little tabs here. Just go ahead and just clip those off. And then on this side, this big circle plug, just go ahead and cut that off here as well. And we'll put some glue on these and just glue those together, sand out that seam, and then later, once the parts are all painted, I can just stick some glue on that and glue that right up into there, and that won't be a problem at all. And obviously, it's not really staying in there now, it's kind of loose, but we'll just glue that later on, easy enough. Then moving down the arm a little bit further onto the hand, we also have some seam lines here. Now I'm just going to keep the closed fists on this, and if we remove the cover on the back of the hand there, you can see we have a seam line that runs down here through this part of the thumb, and it also runs here across all of the front of the fingers, there like that and around to here, which we'll need to remove that. So just a little bit of glue on there, and luckily these parts fit super tightly together, so just a little bit of glue in there, wait for that to dry, sand that down. Not really going to be a big deal so far, just a couple of parts. Let's move down here onto the legs then. Right at the very top of the leg, this part here, this part that connects it to the hip, you got a little bit of a seam line down the side of there. So again, for that, just a little bit of glue on that, and that doesn't bother anything, so that'll be easy enough. Swipe that out. And then the actual thigh and the lower leg armor pieces don't have any seam lines on those. We do have a seam line on this knee joint here, so we can just remove these. And so these thigh pieces, we'll be able to just paint those separately, and this knee joint we'll be able to paint separately. I'll have to remove it from the lower leg parts as well. But anyway, my point is that we won't have to modify anything or cut anything in order to get rid of the seam line on that as well, like with the part for the top of the leg as well. So just remove those seams. And the ankle joint, there's nothing there either. The feet, there's nothing there to remove either. So basically just got the knee joint, the hip joint, the upper arm, and the hands for some seam line removal on the body. Then we do also have a little bit here on the wings. Now this is kind of, I think, really kind of up to you how much of this you want to remove or not. For me, I think I will get rid of some of these. So here on like the main half of the backpack, the top and bottom half, the seam line all the way down the side of that. Well, this is part of the wing there. But anyway, so just getting rid of that seam as well, just the two halves of the backpack sandwiched together. And then down here at the end of the wing as well, there's a seam line on this part here going all the way up to there. So that as well is just these two parts of the wing. Even though it's very thin, there's a little seam line here between the two of that, just running down the side of that. So easy as well, that one, just slip a little glue in there, hold that down, sand it away, and so that's going to be pretty simple. Then here on these yellow bits, there's a seam line right here, but what I'm going to do is just use my scriber to describe the edge of that, to just turn that into a panel line. There's panel lines all over this thing, so I think adding another panel line right here won't really look like I'm trying to hide a seam line. It'll just kind of fit into the overall design of just having panel lines all over the place on this kit. So and it's just a small little thing here on the backpack as well, so I'm not really too worried about that. I think just turning that into a panel line, just save myself a little bit of time and trouble. So alright, I got my work cut out for me. Not a ton of work to remove all the seam lines on this, but that'll take a little bit of time, and basically it'll just take more time just sanding everything, because these parts are huge, so it's going to take a while to sand everything and get everything ready for painting. These parts for the center of the backpack, actually the way the manual shows you to put it together, the front and back half of the backpack shouldn't be sandwiched together until after the wings are installed there, but actually you don't really need to do that, because once this yellow part is on here, then this part, which is the connector for the wings, can just fit onto there and then just slide into place there, and then you'll put the other yellow piece there on top of that to sandwich in the wing connectors. So anyway, just a little side note for any of you guys who are maybe also going to be working on this kit. Oops, okay, so I lied. There is actually one more here on the foot, here on the front of the toe, this seam line that goes around here, and basically what that is the seam line between this part for the top of the foot and the part for the bottom of the foot. The sides of the feet are like sandwiched on here, and just this part for the bottom and the top has a little seam line just here on the front. And so there's a couple ways you could go about that. Basically the problem is that you're encasing this part there for the ankle in there, which I want to have separate, to paint separately as a separate piece. So basically what I'm gonna do here, I have the other foot kind of taken apart a little bit more so you can see what we're gonna do with this. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these and just fix that seam line, but I need to do a little modification to this part in order to be able to get to it Basically, the problem is that once this is glued down onto here, that this won't be able to plug in, like, to fit this in, or to get this forward peg plugged into there, it won't be able to fit. So I'm basically just gonna cut that off here because it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 pegs right around the polycap, the actual ankle joint. So this one here in the front is not really necessarily needed. I think it's probably maybe there for maybe better stability with the foot overall, but I really don't think that it's gonna be all that necessary. So I think we can cut that off there. So you can see now that'll fit down into there, and this will fit snugly over the top of that without being in the way. What's stuck here? There we go. Anyway, so there's that. And then the parts for the side of the foot also do present a little bit of a problem because they don't fit just straight onto the side there. There's this whole bit here which kind of gets in the way, which is actually supposed to be behind this part. So basically I'm just gonna also with that just cut that away so that this will be able to just stick right onto the side of here, and again nothing will be in the way because this, again, there's nothing really necessary there. Basically what that does on the foot is just connected together in here behind this part there for the top of the foot, and it's not really necessary for anything really, so I can just go ahead and get rid of that stuff as well. And bingo bongo, there we go. I did leave a little bit of that there because it actually does show a little bit. Once you get this connected up onto the foot there like that, you can see there's that little bit that does show kind of between the two parts there. And so yeah, that is how we'll go ahead and remove the seam lines with that easy little modification there for the feet. That's cool. So just a little update as the parts preparation is going along. Basically what I'm doing is sanding all the parts by color. So I've got all the purple parts all sanded and washed, so I'm gonna head over and get some primer sprayed on these. I think that's gonna be the best way to go about this because trying to do like everything all at once I think is gonna be too much. So I got all the purple parts all prepped. I'm gonna give them a coat of primer, and then while the primer is curing on them, I'll sand and wash the black parts so then I can kind of work like in a cycle sort of process, making my way through all these parts. And so anyway, I also just wanted to say that for the parts that are going to be white and orange, I'm going to give them a coat of white primer first. And then for the obviously black colors, I can give those just a regular coat of gray primer and all that. So I'm going to be working on just, yeah, like cycling my way through all of the parts, the prep, the painting, and then I will come back once everything is all painted. I'll show you guys how it's looking. Alright guys, so for the painting portion, I'll just do some voiceover here for you guys to explain what I'm doing here. So this is Mr. Color number 41, red brown, that I'm going to be using for pre-shading underneath the orange parts. For all the parts on this kit, I'm going to be using doing a series of pre-shading first, then laying down the main color, then also doing some highlighting on like the center of the armor panels then after that. So it's going to be a multi-step process to this. Underneath the orange, using black for pre-shading, which is a common color for pre-shading. I didn't want to do that because it'd be too dark contrast. Using this dark red brown, it still is kind of a similar color to orange, basically just a really darker version of that. Well, it's not quite as dark as just straight up black, so I figured this would probably work better. Ultimately, it did come out being still a little bit too dark, but we'll see that here in a bit. Anyway, I'm not really all that good at pre-shading, and I'm not really that big of a fan of pre-shading on my kits anyway. I just kind of like a nice, good, solid color. But for this kit, I did want to go ahead and do like the pre-shading, highlighting, everything on that, just because I feel like for how big, and you have all these big armor panels and everything, it's just gonna look really cool to have it all actually pre-shaded. So then for the parts that will ultimately be sort of black, sort of off black, not quite black, I'm using gray primer, and then just straight up black for the pre-shading on these, because then once it gets to the main color will not actually be black. It's pretty rare that I would really recommend using actual just straight up black for coloring, like the parts that you want black on your kit. This is number 71 Midnight Blue, which works really well for colors that you want it to look black, but it's not actually black. It's just a really super dark blue color. But As you can see, it's so dark that you actually can't really see the pre-shading much after this, so that's kind of mostly gone and not really going to be all that visible, but we'll bring back kind of some more color gradient once we add this. This is number 45 sail color, so I'm just going to add a little bit of this into that midnight blue to just lighten it up a little bit. And again, I'm using sail color instead of just white. A lot of people maybe would just use straight up white to lighten the color a little bit, but white will also desaturate the blue a little bit. I still wanted to have a little bit of color tone to it without it being totally desaturated, so that's why I'm using sail color, and I'm going to use that for basically all of the kit. For all of the highlight colors that I'm going to be using, I'll just be adding a little bit of sail color to them instead of white for those. So you'll see that going through here on the highlighting process, how that's just kind of lightening up just the center of the armor panels, giving a kind of nice depth to them. And yes, you'll also notice that I am not wearing gloves. You can if you want, you should. I just typically tend to not. Anyway, here is also the orange color that I'm going to be using is a straight up Mr. Color 59 orange for the main color, and it went on really well. I like this color of orange. I don't really usually tend to use just a straight up orange. I like to mix it up a little bit, but for the purposes of what I plan to have this kit look like, I thought that just straight up regular orange would be the best look for this. But yeah, the pre-shading underneath there was still pretty dark, so it took quite a few coats to really tone down that dark brown for the pre-shading. So I think I ultimately had to go over this 3 or 4 times with a good heavy coat of orange to really tone down how dark that pre-shading was. So I definitely should have gone with something even lighter. But then once again, going to just add a little bit of sail color into that orange for the highlighting on this, and this is where these parts really started to look good, because when it started to now get a nice gradient between the dark to the light, from the edge of the panels being darker from the pre-shading to the center of the panels being now much lighter because of the highlighting. It made a nice gradient on there, and these really started to look very good. That's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we'll continue on with the painting process. I'll see you then. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye, guys.